So welcome to City Barriers to Neighborhood Power. Um, this is actually a fairly lengthy session, 100 minutes. We can take a break halfway through if everybody wants to. I do know there are some folks who will be joining us for the second half. But briefly, my name is Doug Epperhart. I'm the president of the Coastal San Pedro Neighborhood Council. I've been doing the neighborhood council thing for 20 years off and on. So I've had a lot of experience in dealing with the bureaucrats and other neighborhood council board members, politicians. I did serve on the board of neighborhood council or board of neighborhood commissioners for a while. I want to introduce Lou Caravella, who's the president of the Central San Pedro Neighborhood Council. Lou, why don't you give us a little introduction?
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, that's correct. I've been on the Central San Pedro Neighborhood Council since 2017 and been a board member, and I was secretary in 2019, and then have done some other roles since then, vice president and now president. And so I've seen the council from a lot of different angles and worked with a lot of the departments that we'll be talking about today. So hopefully we can get into some good discussion about ways to just remove some of the more obvious impediments, at least, and try to get some more things done that we want to get done and that are the reasons why we all are here in the first place.
Okay, thank you, Lou. I'm looking at sort of breaking this up into the two sessions, and let me begin by sort of laying out what we're looking for, and what I really want here is a discussion. I don't want to sit here and talk to people and take up all the time. I want to hear from you guys. But the first thing is sort of what's embodied in the title of this session, having to do with the various parts of the city bureaucracy. But beyond that, what I'm referring to as structural and regulatory barriers to neighborhood empowerment. And that would be starting at the top with, state law, the Brown Act. I mean, in the past and the history of neighborhood councils, there's been much discussion about how the Brown Act impacts us, and in many ways prevents us from being a little bit more efficient, effective. Other state law, the requirement that we have now of doing Zoom meetings. And I see Michael Browning is here. Welcome, Michael. He is our other panelist, and we'll get to him in a second. But also the training that people have to do, the dealing with the city's funding situation, and all of those various paperwork loopholes that have to be not loopholes, what's the word I'm looking for? Hoops that we have to jump through. And then, of course, all of the other red tape. So those are the things I want to ask about in the first session. We want to hear your stories. And then in the second part of this, I want to talk a little bit about the cultural divide, the us versus them between neighborhood council board members and committee members, and the bureaucracy, the people whose job it is to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and how that can result in a lot of friction. But beyond that, what I also want to do is talk about how we can possibly make this work better. That there are any solutions. Some of them may be simple, some of them may be complex and involved, but that would help this thing work more smoothly and better for everybody. Michael Browning, thank you. Our third panelist, president of Van Nuys Neighborhood Council. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, Michael?
Sure, thank you very much, and glad to be here. Sorry, I was on another Zoom training outside of the system as well. But thanks for the invite. I'm the president of the Van Nuys Neighborhood Council and been that for over a year. And Have lived in the Valley since 1993. Love the Valley. And I love this type of work, and looking forward to the conversation.
Okay. And so let's begin. And I'm going to ask Lou to start. Just give us a few minutes based on your experience in things that you have bumped up against that would be barriers to
Sure.
neighborhood power.
Yeah, I've given this a lot of thought, willingly or otherwise. Sometimes you just come across these barriers and have to react. I thought I'd begin with some snappy visuals, if I could share my screen here.
Yeah, could we make Lou the co-host so he can share his screen?
I think
Yeah, let me, Lou, make you co-host, and Doug, I'll make you Douglas, I'll make you co-host.
Okay, thanks.
And then we'll share the power here. That's the new way we're doing things.
We'll feel more empowered.
There you go.
Okay.
all
Lou?
right. So we have here this, and I don't know if this was the new, I know they had a call for logos about the new LA Neighborhood Council Congress of Neighborhoods, but this is it. And I like that the direction is, the arrow is pointing up. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. I sometimes feel like there should be like a rock in front of us, like Sisyphus or something. So that's what we're trying to get against, but this is good. But what I want to start with logos though, just because I think they speak powerfully to the perceptions that the city, including the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, have about neighborhood councils and our role. And I know that they're still trying to do this Mayor's Youth Council right now. I recently got an email about that, and this is the Mayor's Youth Council logo, which looks pretty cool. And then this is one that's often used in the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment for us and for our elections. So this is the logo for kids, and this is the logo for adults. And it's just so inverted. And it's very frustrating because I often feel like exactly like this, like that's where the power dynamic is supposed to be, that Dunn in the city is sort of like the parental figure that has the final say or is the authority, and we're meant to listen. I don't think it's, I was gonna say, is it as bad as sort of like children should be seen and not heard, or speak only when spoken to? I don't think it's that bad. I do think that Dunn and BONC solicit us for our statements. My concern is just that that's it, that there isn't a lot of listening or follow-up or adapting that goes on after that. So that's kind of how I have been framing this and looking at this. And I have some examples. I have a lot of examples, but a few pertaining to, I've got one good one for Dunn that I hope to get to, one regarding the city attorney's office, and another one, what was my third one? But so as we get into, I don't know if that's how we want to do it, if we want to go by department or.
Yeah, I actually, I'm going to leave it to you guys. Let's see where the conversation goes. But again, that's a good start. That's actually a really interesting thing with the images. So thanks. Mike, tell us about your, I don't know, frustration sometimes with barriers.
Well, lots of them, but let's just start with, I appreciate, that we have age diversity and career diversity on our council. What we're finding is that those members who do not have a full-time job and are retired or semi-retired participate more, like probably in all of your councils, than others. And what we're finding is that that creates kind of a block of people who may have similar backgrounds and issues. And so I think a barrier is the lack of funding for the council to really have staff supporting each council. I know that some councils, carve it out of their budgets and they're fine with that. I'd love to do it. We do have a consultant that's helping with some of our agendas and things like that, and supporting us with some of our infrastructural pieces. However, the city council people, they can't function without staff and resources to help get the work done. And I find that, I'm getting emails and calls and next doors messages and from all over the community. And it's really hard to stay on top of it as a person who's working. And I just, I think that they should rethink on how the councils are resourced so that we can be as professional and responsive to the needs of our community as possible. I know that there's some changes done as far as staff is concerned. And for us in the last year, it's just been a disaster. We have a new representative who's getting to know us. We're getting to know him. He's getting to know the community. And what that does is time that takes to bring people up to speed on how community neighborhood councils work. And we've just gotten little support, I think, for the new members that we fortunately were able to bring in through the election. And the city attorney is swamped, and we've gotten a lot of issues around how to really safeguard our public comment section. We're really open to public comment. It's essential for the work that we do, like all of us. However, when you have some individuals on the community who are not there to be productive, but to who knows what their motives are, having some type of support on how to make public comment sacred and hold it sacred, but also to allow the council to get work done during a meeting. And so we haven't quite come up with that yet with the city attorney on how to make that work. And we're looking forward to doing that. I know that Dunn has gotten better with training for council people, but I would like to make sure that they would have some type of resource library for all, like, for example, these trainings and so forth, where there's documents that new members can come in and just go into the tab. I know the Cornerstone is there, not quite up to speed yet on what it could be, but there's lots of training that's needed for individuals who come into this system who never participated in a meeting that was Robert's Rules or Brown Act or any of that, and helping them to come up to speed with documents and resources, all of the council's bylaws and which councils have in their budgets office spaces and things like that. I think it's helpful instead of just hunting, pecking around trying to find these things, but making it easier for us to build our capacity as we move forward. So that's just a few.
Okay, thank you. Actually, based on what you guys have said, I've completely changed what I was going to say now. But historically, and I was there 20 years ago at the very beginning, when there were, and remember when there were at one point 65 employees in the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. At present, there are about 25. And so I have been through this whole interesting situation. But when the neighborhood councils were first formed and all of this was being organized, I can remember talking to Greg Nelson, who was the second GM, but who was the GM when neighborhood councils were being certified, and saying to him, I do not need what were then called project coordinators and are now called NEAs. I said, I need a clerk. That's what I really need. And at one point I proposed, well, actually I had the conversation with Gail Beltran when she first came into the job. I said, what would be really cool is if you could hire a cadre of clerks, place them in city offices around the city, and assign them to 10 neighborhood councils or 8 neighborhood councils, and they would deal with the city clerk and funding issues. They would fill out the paperwork for us to sponsor events. They would handle the clerk duties and would allow us to concentrate on the job we're doing. You know, at one point, USC was very involved with what was called the Neighborhood Participation Project at the beginning and up through about, I think, 2009, and did regular annual studies on neighbor councils. But I recently looked at a report they had done, and they talked about the fact back then that approximately 2/3 of the items on neighborhood council agendas were administrative matters. They had nothing to do with issues. They were about, you know, authorizing money and changing rules and stuff like that. Stuff that city council members never have to worry about. So I think your points are excellent. And right now, I want to hear from the rest of the folks in this meeting. Tell us, what are your barriers? You know, what if there's one thing you could change, if there's one thing you could get the bureaucrats to do, what would it be? Steve Randolph.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer your question exactly, but I do want to make some comments regarding some of my observations. And quite frankly, Michael Browning did a wonderful job. Mike, I've heard you talk before, and I think you're great. You know, there've been a lot of changes in the system. I've been involved for 9 years, and it seems to me that part of the problems that are happening now are because the original purpose of the neighborhood councils has somewhat changed. You've got almost a battle between neighborhood councils wanting to have more power and the ability to have more input and more influence on what the city does. And then you've got the city or Dunn or Empower LA or however you want to refer to them as trying to diminish the power of the neighborhood councils. So you've got that little bit of a battle going on. I think that's causing problems. And, you know, just like the new code of conduct that came out that they're working on right now, as far as having the ability to suspend elected council members for up to 90 days. And originally, when the original attempt was to put all that power into one person's hands. You know, I know a lot of councils, a lot of council members are adamantly opposed to it. I have to agree with them. There's also an issue that I find with the city in general and with government in general, and it just happened in Sacramento for the state of California with SB 9 and 10, where you know, it's like one size fits all, with the being able to take a single family residence and subdivide the property and put 2 homes on each property. So you now have 4 homes on one piece of property in a single family residential neighborhood. You know, that's great. It's a great idea for some places. I don't think it's good for West Hills, but you know, it's kind of like the one size fits all thought process that's getting in the way. I know that our particular council has major issues with people at public comments, where they're supposed to be able to speak up against the way the council functions and the way different aspects of the council function, maybe the way a committee functions, but instead they're singling out individuals, slandering those individuals, and God knows I've got a huge target on my back, and we feel like we're helpless because I'm being told you can't do anything about it. I don't know if that's true or not, but I asked that question in the previous meeting. Of course, nobody bothered to answer it. And Michael also touched on something else that I thought was really good, and that's about educating our board members. In our neighborhood council, we have 25 members, 13 seats came up for election. There were 2 slates, and I'm bragging, but the slate I put together, all 13 of them got elected overwhelmingly. And what that meant was that we have 6 brand new board members. So that's 24% of our board. And I remember when I came on the board 9 years ago, I didn't have a clue what was going on. And it took me plenty of time just to figure it out. So what I did was I put together a new member handbook for these new members to help them get a kickstart, you know, so that they could get an idea of how things function, how the board functions, how we relate to the city, and what our duties are, what we can do and what we can't do. So there are issues. I'm not sure if I'm totally addressing the question. But again, I think the biggest problem is what feels like, and it's been described to me in these words, as a power grab by those who are above the individual NC level to exert more control over us. And I get it to some extent because, like I say, the NCs are doing the same thing. They're trying to get more control. And the city's trying to take away some control. So where that's going to end up, I don't know. But I have to say that I absolutely have loved 7 of the 10 years that I've served. And the last 2 years I'm not loving. So I see Michael shaking.
Uh-oh, I was going to see, I need to. All right, well, okay. Number 1 priority, we need to bring back the love. All right, thank you, Steve. By the way, Lou at Central San Pedro, he's got 17-member board. 9 of them are brand new. So he actually has a brand new group practically to deal with.
I want to address that later too. I can respond to that. Steve,
Yeah, with
definitely.
Lou and Mike, did you have any comments? And then we'll pick up with David.
Oh, sure. Well, I was just going to say that we have a very hard time with the new people, trying to get them up to speed and trying to get them also not to be distracted by some misleading approaches to the neighborhood council, or just by some, just alternative ways of handling things that aren't good, or just, having some people on the board that are whispering in their ears some non-productive things. So that's a big problem. Compounding our problem is a specific thing that I want to work on with Don in the city attorney's office, but definitely we have some boundary issues because we have a member of our neighborhood council that also publishes a neighborhood newspaper. And we have just had a tremendous amount of boundary issues there. But it's going to be important. I'm trying to get our remaining veteran members to really kind of sit down and talk with our new people, which has been hard because a lot of times, that happens in person at meetings and things, but, to kind of schedule separate coffees and separate phone calls and things like that. And I'm hoping we can have some more like training sessions and sort of orientations for the new people. We had one that was really good, and maybe we can do another one soon. We had one on basic rules and motions and how a meeting is supposed to run. And maybe now we can do something about I'd like to do something about community impact statements and things like that. But so there is, everybody is right. There's a lot of training that you have to do, and a lot of onboarding, and getting people up to speed also about just the specific dynamics of your specific neighborhood council and your, council district office and all the things that you have to deal with on that level too.
Okay, thanks. So Mike, did you have something, Michael?
No, we'd love to hear about other folks.
Okay, all right. David, you're up. What do you have to say?
Okay, well, a couple things. First of all, I want to acknowledge Mike. My parents were part of Van Nuys on the west side before there was a 405, and they were just on the other side of the airport, which was much smaller then too. So they're probably in Lake Balboaville now, but I think Van Nuys is still what they called it way back in the 50s. So I want to acknowledge your work, your great neighborhood over there. I'm in Winnetka now. I moved to the city at first, and that's where I got to meet Doug. It's so nice to see you at Lank and other places, because you were that sage, you were that wise person who talked so well about so many things. I'm intrigued by what you were saying about staffing. I think that's really fundamental and really speaks to the approach of what done is or can be. Before I moved into the city, I was involved in a small city of Agora Hills, incorporated in '82. I had chaired an advisory council at one point. It's half the population of the typical NC, but we had a much more accessible infrastructure in terms of staff support and all that. When I had my meetings, I had somebody from the city, full-time person, doing the minutes and all that sort of thing. So I think that's really important thing. When we had our general manager's speech today, a couple things struck me. And we fetched a little bit about, well, what can we do as neighborhood councils to not be quashed and that sort of thing. What I seem to be recognized on the one hand is that the general manager has a very firm belief in what neighborhood councils and the power of neighborhood councils. We may think otherwise, but I think there's a recognition there. And I think it's coming from her background in terms of neighborhood organizing and all that. She sees value in it in the way that people are able to access that and really fulfill the mission of neighborhood councils. As opposed to trying to control us, she wants to allow people to use the neighborhood councils. Now, use is another question. And, Steve, I know I heard a little bit about what happened in the other slate, I guess, in terms of it's one thing if it's grassroots, it's another thing if another organization decides we're going to take over the grassroots and that sort of thing. So that's another whole key thing. But we, by nature, have to allow for that. We have to be able to speak back and have fair and counteract that. But that's part of the inclusiveness that what we're all about. In terms of that perspective of done, one other thing that Raquel talked about is how you had the triad of done. You had the city clerk and a city attorney. That's a real nice partnership of those three, but are they supporting neighborhood councils along with BONC, or are they overseeing us? And that's the balance, and that's really tricky. My predecessor, and a lot of this has to do with the bureaucratic stuff, referred to them as don't. And I've used that, I've defined the T as throttling, because sometimes the process and that sort of thing serves to not allow us to do all we can do, but to throttle us as in a combustion engine, which of course is an appropriate reference, not wringing our neck. But that happens sometimes. The sense of that happen is that, and it really depends on the personality. One NEA might be supportive, another one may be, well, wait, you're not doing that right. My interpretation of your bylaws are that you can't do that, so you can't do, you have to table that. That's something that makes it really hard to understand how we're being supported as opposed to being constrained from trying to do too much.
Okay.
But the last thing I wanted to say in terms of new board members, and sometimes they may come with an agenda, but if you're able to really exhibit the right things about a neighborhood council, you can open their eyes to what we are all about and how to get the same thing done. That's not preconceived, but we can actually listen to what's being talked about at our meetings as opposed to making up our mind first. So I've been lucky to get some really good board members amongst the new ones. So.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm sort of laughing. I know of a neighborhood council board member here in San Pedro who refers to it as the Department of Neighborhood Enforcement. So I hear what you're saying. All right, Fallon. Fallon, unmute, please. Fallon?
Yeah, okay, am I?
There
here
you
now?
go.
Yeah,
There
okay,
you go.
sorry
You're
about
on.
that. I must have hit the wrong thing.
No problem.
I just want to comment as a stakeholder in Venice. What I've noticed is that there is no real process to educate stakeholders in general about how an NC should operate. So the training is only available to board members and not to everyone else. And so when new people arrive on board, they're, playing catch up. I mean, it also goes for people running committees. And I think that's a real problem. If you've got a dysfunctional board, a group that isn't operating very well, it's difficult for stakeholders to even find out what they're doing wrong, or also people have witnessed that and think it's the normal way to behave. I mean, I can say that when I first started going to BNC meetings, I asked why they never were filing any CISs. And I had a board member who was an officer tell me, oh, we never file them unless the council office reaches out to us and tells us to do so. And I was just like flabbergasted that this was the attitude. And it's really frustrating, I think, is if everyone knows how it's supposed to operate, not just the people who are elected, then maybe the whole thing will function a little bit better. And I completely think it's terrible that we have a political organization in Los Angeles who wants to control the narrative downtown. And they've done so quite successfully because most of us weren't going downtown to those meetings. Zoom has made it a little more accessible. And now they're definitely coming to the NCs and trying to disrupt them and take them over to continue controlling the narrative. And without the information we all need as stakeholders, we aren't going to be able to take back the narrative. And that's what I see happening here in LA.
Okay, thank you. Mike, you had something to jump in with?
Yes, thank you, Fallon, for that. That was excellent. And let me mute that other Zoom meeting. And you're accurate. So when we get folks and they're so excited to come in and help make change, and then they find out that there's rules and that there are things that they can't do and can't spend money on and all these things, they get frustrated and then their participation wanes. And so I think that's a great idea, that somehow that we can help inform stakeholders and community members on how this system currently works, so that they are prepared to assist us in getting the work done and we assist them, but also that when they're interested in running, they know exactly what they're getting into. So thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that comment.
It's a great comment, and I have pointed out many a time, one of the great failures of this system, whatever that system is in managing expectations. They will have elections, get people all pumped up about getting elected to a neighborhood council and doing good things for the community. Then they will throw hours and hours of training at them, a giant rule book, and that balloon gets deflated really quick. As when I lead sessions for new neighborhood councils, I say, look, Dunn will tell you what you cannot do. What I'm here to do is tell you what you can do. And I think all too often that's what we miss. David Raquello, tell us something good.
Oh, Doug, thank you so much. This is a really excellent forum, and I'm so glad that you're back. Here, let me back up a little bit. I'm so glad that you're back at length and going to those meetings on the first Saturday of the month, because 99 neighborhood councils, my gosh, if you can count, folks, we can rule the city if you can count. But here's the thing, it's not about holding on to power. It really isn't. I am so blessed that I've had wonderful replacement presidents that have followed me. And they are just running the neighborhood council excellently now. I had to learn the lesson the hard way by getting voted out of office, but now I'm much more accepting of my new position as Lank representative. And I'm trying to get the band back together, Doug. So keep on coming back. You're our drummer.
Okay. All right. Actually, my brother is the drummer in my family. Thank you, David. Rachel Rose.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rachel Rose Lucky. I'm the president of the RVNC right after David Raquello. And now we have Philip, who is also doing an awesome job. And kudos to David for his years of keeping the RVNC running smoothly. So I am appreciative of that. Yeah, I was at the workshop. I'm not on my board anymore right now, but I was at the workshop for the the what was that workshop? The not ethics, but
Code of conduct, perhaps?
code of
recently?
conduct. Yeah, that's what it is. I'm sorry. It's been a long day already. And we sat there and listened for an hour, a little more than an hour, of the department telling us why they have authority over us. And at one point, they made the argument that per the city charter, board members are nothing more than volunteers, elected volunteers, that we are not elected city officials. The charter does say that there are only a certain number of elected city officers, and those are the council members, the mayor, the controller, and the city attorney. And and I don't know who was receiving the emails back and forth between during the very public fight that I had with Raquel Beltran back in April of 2020, when she was telling us, oh no, you can't meet, even though the governor relaxed the Brown Act, you can't meet virtually, you have to wait for our protocols. And I argued back, we are independent deliberative bodies, and we can meet any damn time we want, as long as we are within our own bylaws and within state and city regulations. And I get, I forget who was saying, like the balance between having neighborhood councils have power, but also the city wanting to make sure that they're the ones in power. But it just seems to me that the whole time that I was on the neighborhood council, and even up to the present day, that the department and the city itself are trying to do everything in their power to make it so that we have as little influence as possible at City Hall, unless like the person from Venice earlier said, oh no, we only put out CISs, basically when the council member asks, or in other words, when we agree with the council member. And that's just, I just really think that that the city council members have not utilized the neighborhood council system to their best advantage, to be able to relate and be able to take that, to take that advice. We're advisory to City Hall. So, when we give you advice, it's not because we, plucked it out of our butts. We had deliberations, we had committee meetings, we had don't make faces at me, David. Raquel, I'm not playing. But it's not like we just all of a sudden just turned around one day and said, oh well, we just hate everything this council member is doing, so whatever. We've taken community input, we've had the committee meetings, we put it through a full vote, we've vetted this, and especially when it comes to planning and land use issues. And so I won't take up any more time, But those are my thoughts on the conversation at hand.
Okay, I thank you much. I'm just going to briefly say something that I said to General Manager Beltran when she did her listening tour. And when she came to Coastal San Pedro, what I said to her was, there's something I'd like you to understand. And that is that we are grown-ups. We may not always act like it, but the people who do are really a very small number. Yet they get all the attention for some bizarre reason. And I said, I've run a business without bankrupting it. I've raised 2 children without murdering them. I think I can handle a neighborhood council. And whether you mean it or not, I'd at least like the appearance of a certain level of respect. And I have been to a lot of neighbor council board meetings recently and other meetings, and I have heard that word respect over and over and over again. Mike and Lou, if you have anything to jump in here on this stuff, please do. I see Lou leaning forward.
Oh, yeah, these are really good things. I mean, I'm trying to think of the best anecdote to apply here, but yeah, I mean, one of the things, I can talk about, I guess, some difficulty that we've had with the city attorney's office as well, and sort of
pick a topic.
Sure. And I think a lot of times they're sort of aligned with Dunn, oftentimes against a neighborhood council, which is not helpful. But we had an instance, I'll just tell a quick story, where it was an ongoing problem where there was a pretty divided board. This was a couple of years ago. And when a committee would try to post an agenda for a committee meeting, if the president didn't like some of the agenda items, or if she thought they were critical of her, she just wouldn't post the agenda. And so then you're not doing the posting requirements needed for the Brown Act compliance. And so the committee meetings would happen, and then we would get a note from Dunn afterwards, like, oh, that committee meeting was invalid because you didn't post the agenda. So it was kind of an effective little scam there for a while. But it was very frustrating. And when we ultimately appealed to the city attorney's office about this, it took forever to get any sort of response. Then they finally sent 2 deputy city attorneys to our meeting. They said that the city attorney, Mike Fuhrer, knew about it and the issue, and these 2 deputies were coming. And their ultimate message was, because neighborhood councils, because of their status in the law as advisory and elected, but sort of not elected because we have potential non-citizens voting and that type of thing. Anyways, whatever our status was, this city attorney argues that he is not required to enforce the Brown Act at neighborhood councils. And in addition to that, he will not be enforcing the Brown Act at neighborhood councils. Now, this is in addition to the fact that our bylaws, and I'm sure your bylaws, the bylaws of many other neighborhood councils, if not all of them, have language saying that we are beholden to the Brown Act, that that's something that we value and that we will be following whether we have to or not. And it's the city attorney's office specifically that signs off on our bylaws. So when the city attorney's office says they're not going to enforce the Brown Act at neighborhood councils, that means 2 things. We're not going to enforce state law, and we're not going to enforce your bylaws, because in this case, if you have the Brown Act in your bylaws and you violate the Brown Act, you're violating the law and the bylaws. In any event, that's just a long way of saying that, that doesn't do us any good. In fact, it hurts us, because now we have city attorneys going to our meetings explaining to people how they can get away with breaking or at least abusing the Brown Act in letter or in principle, and the bylaws for that matter. So it's not helpful to us. And I think that some of this might have been politically motivated. Some of this might have been to put us in our place or to send a message to our neighborhood council. But if it is politically motivated, those have consequences too. If we want to talk politics, because now, the city attorney is running for mayor, and it's not a very good campaign slogan to say, vote for me. I'm transparent when legally mandated to be transparent. When legally required to be open, I'll do it. That's not a winning slogan. And, so these are the ways that we can hold them accountable. And that's what we should do. We should remember these instances and hold them to higher standards where they can encourage, people to follow the right ways of doing things. And at least if they're not going to enforce it, at least discourage the bad behavior. I'm not saying that they need to convene some, body to remove them. And as people have alluded to, the whole new code of conduct issue is a big deal too. But, short of that, there's plenty of things that the city attorney's office can do to discourage people. And usually people listen if they get a stern letter from a lawyer. So that's another big barrier and needing to work with the city attorneys properly and more effectively.
Okay, thank you. Let me throw a question out to everybody. If trying to figure out how to word it properly. When dealing with anybody in the bureaucracy, city attorney, DUNS, city clerk, whatever it is, what's the biggest irritation or annoyance for you? It doesn't have to be a big thing. Just what's the one thing that you really say to yourself, oh my God, I wish they would stop it, or I wish they would do it. Fallon.
My biggest irritation is I happen to believe that bylaws and rules are supposed to be there to make sure everybody gets treated fairly. We're all on the same page. Nobody's getting discriminated against. And it irritates me to no end that when you report, and it's even recorded on a video, that this has been not done properly, nothing ever happens. So all it does is reinforce, hey, don't follow the rules, you get away with it. Who cares? I don't understand the point of even having Empower in place. I totally disagree with their proposed code of conduct thing. Allegations is absurd. But when there's clear documented evidence that a NC is not following the rules, why somebody can't sit down with them and say, hey, this stops, enough. Because I've been at meetings and I will quote the former president of the VNC, I am the president, I make the rules. So how do you argue with that, folks?
Yeah, let me ask a question of you, and this question comes from my long experience. Do you believe that the department, trying to think of how to word this diplomatically, do you believe that they often defer to individuals who are presidents just because they're presidents?
I think I can say from my observation of the VNC, I think there often is a disrespect of advice that is given. We're very fortunate. We have Freddie Coupon Ames as our representative, and he's really terrific. And he tries to be very tactful when they engage in something that is, would be viewed as an irregularity or bad behavior. And we've got board officers who just talk right over them and demand that, well, that's not what I think it really is, and that can't possibly be right. I want the parliamentarian to weigh in, and the parliamentarian weighs in and, completely disregards the Robert's rules. And, so I don't know, if you don't have a respect for the authority in a way, or the advice they're going to give you, if they, Freddie will always read, well, it says here, he's very good at that. I've seen some other people in their interactions from Empower with the NCs not do that. They just sit there, and I don't even know why they're at their meeting, but he will jump in and say, no, that's not the right, that's very tactfully. So if they're not going to listen, and your attitude is, I'm just going to be bad and I can get away with it, what are you going to do? Because apparently there's no way to fix it.
Okay, there actually is, but it's a lot of hard work. Okay, Steve, and then Michael, or did you have a comment on that, Michael?
Well, not that one in per se. So yeah, I'll wait till after Steve.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, so there's two questions actually on the floor. The first one was, do the people seem to defer primarily to the NC president of a neighborhood council? I think they do, but I don't see that that's a major problem. The president is the liaison, I would think, for everybody above us. And so I think that is the appropriate person to refer these issues to. You know, I'm not saying that it should be done always in lieu of discussing a matter with an NC member, but I don't see a problem with that. The previous question, let's see if I can remember what I was going to say.
What irritates you?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that, thank you. I wouldn't say that it's
Or
an
annoying,
irritation.
yeah.
I wouldn't say it's an irritation. It's kind of a thought that's in the back of my mind whenever I deal with a city attorney or deputy city attorney. While I know that they're here to help us and to give us advice, I also have in the back of my mind their real job is to protect the city from litigation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I somehow can't get that out of the back of my mind that to me, there's a conflict of interest. Because how do you balance both of those things? So it's not a major irritation. It's just something that's in my mind when I'm speaking with them. Thank you for hearing me.
Okay, thanks. Mike?
Yes, thanks again, and thank all of you for being here. So one is, I, as a new president, like I said, for just not even a year yet, you know, there would have been some nice transitional things that I could have gotten from done, and we had a previous rep who left in the middle of that and was doing some fine coaching up until her time of leaving, and then there was a shift, and then there were some staff decreases and so forth, and so that's been difficult. And if I do email or reach out to someone, it would be great if, you know, the response was I can get back to you in 72 hours, a week, a month, something so I have some time frame. Or should I make a decision and then live with it, or should I continue to wait and send emails? You know, sometimes on an issue I'll have to send 5 or 6 emails, and that could be either to the city attorney office, done, whomever, and it's only because I need to make a decision and need to get back to the rest of the council that I would love to get that information. So at least if there was a standard email response that came back 72 hours, you hear back from something, so that I can know how to proceed and make a decision. Another thing is that we do get California Public Record Act requests, and only because I have experience from another part of my life and dealing with those have I been able to do those without any support from the city. But I'm thinking about the person who's not me, who's going to be the next president or vice president, whomever, and we'll have to go through sifting through emails and files and, in our case, text messages and all of that to secure these messages, and how time consuming that may be. And so I'm wondering, you know, that frustrates me only because I will have to hand this off eventually to someone else in the council who will have to do that. And how do they manage their time into getting that work done? As far as being the president, what I do is, and this agreement I made with my vice president, but not my vice president, the council's vice president, is that I would CC her on all of the matters that come in regarding the council so that she's aware of what's coming in. You know, I farm things out, but I want her to be aware, because if I'm not there, she can just pick up and run with it. I was only appointed president last year because of the fact that our president resigned on the spot. And I was the vice president, and he held everything close to the chest, and I absolutely do nothing about how to make the next step on anything. And thank God for Simi, who kind of coached me, like I said, for the first month and a half of that to get up to speed. But I think it's important that the vice president has as much information as possible about what's going on. So especially during a pandemic, that if that person needs to step in, that they're ready to hit the ground running.
Okay, thank you, Mike. David? And Tony, did you want to weigh in at some point? You had your hand up earlier.
Oh, actually, I have two quick thoughts. One is about Fallon's comment. The challenge is that, again, like we talked about, I think we just had a marketing meeting where we talked about diversity and challenges like this. Rules are not always the way we solve problems. And actually, I'd like to also suggest, I'm thinking poor Mike sitting there waiting for a response from Dunn, appeals to authority or for some dictate from Dunn to come down. Remember that it may come down completely different if you ask on Tuesday or Thursday and get a different person. We've got a problem of, and so a lot of the times in the past, early, we had to answer these questions for ourselves. We had to read the Brown Act for ourselves. We had, like, for example, we have always been responsible for ourselves to make certain that our meeting places are ADA accessible. Now the department has decided that we can't meet in person again unless they have an ADA inspection by some city department. That's insane. We should know what's required. So a lot of this is an effort by the city to institutionalize things, which were in the past our responsibility. And this is one of my frustrations is, yes, hold us to those same standards, including Brown Act compliance, but don't sit here and try and you know, this basically it's helicopter parenting, and it isn't good for kids and it isn't good for us. So I'll shut up.
Okay. As one who is definitely not a helicopter parent, I'm with you. All right, David.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. You actually pointed out something that's part of what my thoughts were in regards to the two questions in front of us, and it relates to it in regards to the ADA. And interestingly, when my current NEA mentioned this, and I asked and pushed back ever so gently, that's my approach with him, it was explained that this was a requirement coming from the clerk. So I thought that was really interesting. But the other thing that you said, it depends, is the answer to the questions. It depends. My first neighborhood council was like, it sounds like what's going on in Venice, and Fallon, I feel for you. That neighborhood councilor is no longer named the same, which is a hint of how dysfunctional that became. We had some great NEAs. Gracie was one of them. We, you know, in my 13 years on neighborhood councils, I've had lots of great NEAs with different levels of understanding of where we're coming from, the balance between support and advice and controls. But I always loved it when we were able to get somebody who said, well, okay, you're supposed to be doing it this way. So in fact, I've been doing this for a while. I got 35 years doing Brown Act meetings and all that. I think I'm okay. And when they're able to pivot and recognize that, and as you develop the chemistry between them, that's great. But it's the inconsistency, and whether that's training or temperament, I don't know. I know when funding was still in house, it really depended on who do you talk to as to what rules were, what stated written rules were actually going to be followed versus, no, that's okay. And likewise, if the documentation we sent in would end up on the filing cabinet at the satellite office in Little Tokyo, that would never be found again. And we were responsible, and then we were restricted for funding because they couldn't find something that was there. My current NEA right now is definitely not deferring to the president. But in my trying to approach and have a conductive meeting and not have discussions and arguments, particularly with Dunn staff in the middle of a meeting, because I don't have time for it, I have to jump through a lot more hurdles, pushback issues, things that are interpreted when they're interpreting my bylaws differently than what we may have or our standing rules may be, and the way we've done everything for 5-10 years. And then all of a sudden we have saying, no, you can't do it that way. That's what's really frustrating, is when there's that lack of consistency. But on the other hand, in their defense, they've got a lack of consistency in neighborhood councils. I love my board right now. We've got good new board members. My second and final term by term limits as president. I've got responsibility to bring these new people in because they're going to be the leadership moving forward. That's kind of what Mike was saying. It's not always the case, in which case you really do need the NEA to be able to guide, lead, and censure as possible. I guess, therefore, because we need them to be able to have the flexibility, because there's the flexibility and differences and discrepancies between neighborhood councils and their temperaments. We just need to narrow the tolerances a little bit so it doesn't swing so wide in one side or the other. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, David. Lou?
Yeah, a lot of people have touched on some really good things that have got me thinking. I think one thing that to remember about, like, when we have conflicts at our boards and with Dunn intervening in a very sort of inconsistent way, is that the department has a luxury that the neighborhood councils don't have, which is that they can sort of look at all 99 neighborhood councils and all the drama and problems and conflict happening at all of them and pick and choose where to intervene. Whereas we don't have that sort of luxury. Like, if we have a problem on our neighborhood council, I'm the president of mine. If it's a big enough problem, that's my problem. I'm gonna have to deal with it. If it doesn't get dealt with by someone else, by like another officer or by a committee chair or something. And so, you know, they can sort of pick and choose the problems to solve. And then that means they can choose problems to solve that will make them look good or increase their standing or their department's standing in some way, because they, you know, have to argue for their own budget every year, of course, and want to solve problems that are solvable. They don't want to jump into these ones. And that leads also to the issue of what somebody else brought up earlier, that the city attorney's main role, or one of them, is to shield the city from lawsuits. And that's true. But I think that that is something that we can use the neighborhood councils to our advantage as well, though, because Dunn can be take some big liberties with some of the powers that they want and seek and exercise. And some of that stuff places them in liability as well. So what I'm saying is we can use the sort of specter of liability, the fear of that, of lawsuits, to try to keep Dunn in line as well, and should maybe look into that. And I feel like there was a third thing I wanted to add as well. If I think of it, I will get back to you, Doug.
Okay, thank you. So let me now see if we can get to something that might involve some solutions. And I thank those who are contributing, but there are a lot of you online here that I have not heard from, and I think we'd like to hear your contribution. And that's this: if there is something, anything, however big or small, that you believe that Dunn, city clerk, city attorney, whoever, could change or do right now, for example, make it their policy to acknowledge communication, say within 24 hours or even 48 hours. That would be my first thing. But tell me, what pet peeve do you think that they could fix for you and do it quickly? I hear a lot of thinking out there. Anybody? I'm not making everybody's brains melt
Yes,
down,
yes.
am I?
So releasing the Zoom
We'll get to
contact.
Fallon in a minute. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, releasing more than one person's access to the Zoom password so that I don't have to at least start 30 meetings a month, and other folks have responsibility for at least getting meetings started. I think it's insane.
Okay, you are not the first neighborhood council president I've heard that from. Fallon.
sort of going to answer this slightly obliquely because there was a comment about the Empower has the access to see what is going on in all the different neighborhood councils and local neighborhood councils don't. If they're seeing that there is a pattern in the neighborhood councils, misunderstanding something, complaining about something, and a lot of them, this is a problem all the time, why don't they ever address it? It shouldn't be just a micro-managed solution. And I've seen too, by going to other council meetings where, something's a big deal with Empower at one meeting and another meeting does exactly the same thing and they just can do it. So that would, what I would like to change is the unhanded unevenness of the information or the enforcement.
Okay.
And fix it if a lot of people are doing it wrong.
Okay. And thank you for that. I'm actually writing these down and planning to send something to Dunn and say, this is what came out of this meeting. And I think maybe you could act on some of this stuff fairly quickly. And then we'll see what happens. Okay, Tony.
The meeting issue. This is a classic case of unnecessary intervention. Again and again, we hear the great success of the virtual government program. Guess what? We could read the governor's executive order 2. We could simply go to virtual meetings based on the executive order. But what actually happened is the city council had a problem with Zoom bombers and then wrote the most restrictive possible way to use Zoom for themselves. And then, because of course we have to follow this lead of the city council, we had a Department of Neighborhood Empowerment who took that completely restrictive, you must dial in by phone and do *9 way to turn off all of our customers to our meetings and put it out as the official virtual governance program. Well, I want to give the general manager credit. I yelled and screamed. I wasn't the only one. But she actually made only parts of that mandatory. So some words that are required to be on your agendas. The rest was quote unquote strongly advised. As a result, we can do anything we want. As a matter of fact, I know there's a discussion about chat. Private chat between board members is always a violation, potentially. The public could see what we're doing. If we're in a public meeting, if I say something to Lou, and you can see me say something to Lou, it's not secret. So frankly, in our workshops that we try and be conversational, we turn on public chat. First of all, there's only 8 people in the room. Second of all, we have enough self-discipline. We are not going to private message each other. The public chat is to enable people to have a conversation with us or us to post links and stuff like that grown-up people can do without grown-up people violating the Brown Act. On a board level, it is probably not the case. But I just want to bring this up as a case because now we have a large group to design a new virtual governance system, and somehow it has become perceived by neighborhood councils that we must wait for permission from the department to do something. For example, the multiple Zoom account. We can just go out and buy multiple Zoom accounts. There's no prohibition against that. I mean, I'm using, because I didn't have access to it, I am actually using a GoToMeeting for my land use and rules workshops. It doesn't work as well as Zoom, but it's unlimited and it's the cheapest the most service I can get with cloud recording for $20 a month. I'm just explaining that this idea that we have to depend on an official permission from the department to doing something we could do ourselves is wrong. But when we do it ourselves, we have to be conscious that we follow the same rules Dunn wants us to, and the city and the state want us to follow.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Am I the only one who thinks Tony may have had too much coffee today? Okay, Lou.
No, not enough. That's good. I think that's the way we should be thinking about it too, is in the context. Like, why does city council need and want certain Zoom things? Why do we need and want certain Zoom things? You know, what does the state law say? And then you can sort of realize what's going to be most effective and practical. So I think we should think about it like that. I was just going to say, with in terms of my, I guess, a general pet peeve with done that I could mention is that you know, they are very structured, and they give, you know, sometimes they'll give like a formal reply on letterhead about certain issues and things like that. Those take usually weeks or months to produce. But we don't need that with everything. I mean, with certain things, if they're just like an obvious problem or issue, as sort of informal response from Dunn, just being like, you know, cut that crap out, is, I think, is totally fine. And I mean, certainly some stuff will escalate to a level where you need to maybe contact the city attorney's office or get attorneys involved. But for like very basic things, you know, I think it's fine if the NEA just steps in and says, you know, that sounds unusual, I will check on this, but in the meantime, I don't suggest, you know, don't do that. You know, just the other day, we had our meeting last Tuesday, our monthly meeting, and at the very end, we weren't going to extend the meeting. We've actually even had to make a standing rule to have a hard stop at 9:30, because it was just, it would go on forever, and it was, you know, taking up people's nights, and people hated it. And a full-on tantrum at literally at 9:29, because I wasn't going to extend the meeting, and just screaming. And I just emailed the colleague, the board member, afterwards, saying, you know, just don't do that in the future, yelling. And, you know, this is also the time of year that we have students come to look at government for their classes and their projects around, you know, this time of year, election season. And so they were there, and, you know, he reamed me out in the following email, and I'm not going to respond because there's nothing to discuss. I mean, it's not like, you know, can you or can't you disrupt a meeting? That there's nothing to discuss there. It's against California state law to disrupt a meeting. And if you do, you get your 2 warnings and then 3 strikes and you're out. So I think with little things like that, Dunn can do a lot better at just sort of preventing the day-to-day nonsense and the BS that, you know, is done for whatever reasons it's done, whether it's petty politics or just spite or whatever. But there's a lot of little dumb things that, you know, I feel like they can intervene on and just sort of lead by example and just say, this is the right way to do, without making a big production about it all the time.
I think so. I'm actually going to weigh in here with a couple of things that I would love to see happen. You know, if I were the king of the neighborhood council system, or even general manager Dunn, the first thing I would do is I would take that entire Dunn staff and I would send them off to customer service training. Okay, ideally at a place like Disney, you know, who are like the gold standard with this. Because I think there's a fundamental barrier or obstacle between neighborhood councils and Dunn staff, certainly city clerk funding staff, in the basic attitude. And it's very interesting because in the conversation today, I see many of you sort of accept that, in that somehow they are our managers, that they should have some superior knowledge and a right or authority to intervene and guide us, as opposed to essentially, we're the boss, if we need help, we'll ask. Now, what I see here all too often is a situation in which something will arise and a neighborhood council board member, president, whoever, will ask and either get 3 different answers, no answer, or the answer to a completely different question. I mean, I think that is a source of tremendous frustration in the system. And I've heard the word inconsistency over and over and over again as I have talked to neighborhood council people over the last few months. I mean, I've got pages and pages of notes from meetings, And that's kind of what led to this. To see if there's anybody out there saying anything differently. I don't want to put it all on the department. I've run a business for a long time. I've managed a lot of people over the years. As I have said, the number one job of a neighborhood council board president is managing egos. That's what we do. And it is a very hard job. And when you have someone from the city clerk saying, oh, I'm sorry, but we can't, fund that because there's a signature missing on page 6 of an NPG. So you have to go back and vote on it again. Okay, so let's start with that. Or in the middle of a meeting, a NEA who pipes up and said, oh, I don't like the way this agenda item is worded. So I think you should table that and come back next month once you've added the three words that I want you to add. By the way, a most recent example from a neighborhood council very close to me. So, to me, these are the things that can be easily addressed, but there needs to be a real cultural shift within the bureaucracy to recognize that they are not here to be our overseers or managers, but to be our maybe teachers, maybe help, maybe assistants, if we ask for it. So, Lou, you have your hand up?
Yes, unless of course someone else wants to jump in too. I don't, I hope we can, everybody is welcome to participate. I just wanted to, I caught on to what you're saying about how it's not entirely done, and I realize we haven't spoken really at all yet about BONC, and the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners is a tricky thing because I really don't know what to make of them. I'm not sure how they fit in, how they're helpful to the neighborhood councils in our day-to-day. At this point, it just seems like they're kind of the extension or enforcement arm maybe of done, or done as the enforcement arm of them maybe. But I would think that the neighborhood commissioners would try to focus on the neighborhood councils and improving them and improving and sort of acting in the interests of the neighborhoods and the neighborhood councils. And I'm not seeing that, and it's very unfortunate. And I don't quite know what to do there. I mean, I know that the bond commissioners and the general manager of Dunn are all mayoral appointees. Maybe they have some sort of cohesion or shared mission there, but I don't know. Maybe Tony can help me on that one.
Well, it's just an opinion, but I think we have a structural structural problem with the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners, because its original purpose, of course, was to certify neighborhood councils, and if they became disasters, to decertify them. But everyone in the city, including us in the community, know it's such a terrible thing to form a neighborhood council. You never want to ever decertify one because it deprives the neighborhood of something that is rightfully theirs. You just want to fix what's in place. So they never decertify any. So they have nothing else to do. So they've been looking for decades ago, they started looking to become policy makers. Well, to me, a policy, it's like the difference between bylaws and standing rules. A policy is a structural statement of, we would like, these are the things that should happen to be fair and equitable. Then it goes to the department, which under the plan for neighborhood councils, the way I read it, can do anything it damn well pleases. I hate to say that, but I mean, it's a pretty strong plan for neighborhood councils. They are supposed to implement the policy with detailed rules, which if we yell and scream about, they could probably change tomorrow, but that wouldn't change a BONC policy. But no, BONC does either of two things. They take, for example, a one paragraph board replacement policy that just said, if they're not a quorum and you have so and so many people, you can appoint up, I can't remember, up to 5 members to make a quorum again. It was easy to implement. By the time another BONC commission got finished with it, a lawyer made it into a 2.5-page single-spaced document that when they tried to apply it to Mission Hills north of me, the city attorney told them it was so complicated that it actually wasn't applicable to their situation and they couldn't use it. So they turned basically a policy into a rule, and a bad rule at that. And the second thing is that they then do things like decide that all neighborhood council agendas will be posted to the ENS system and decide that they must be sent to the department. But guess what? They don't have to worry about the department budget. It's been more streamlined now, but when that was first put into effect, there were 3 full-time equivalent people at the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment receiving our agendas and posting them to the ENS system, all taking it out of the department's budget because a so-called policy had been created by BONC. Then you have the problem that BONC is staffed by the department, so they can't do anything without the department's help. So you then begin to have this symbiotic relationship where if the department wants to put out a social media policy, that they instantly get feedback from difficult people like Tony and Doug. They, we'll just give it to BONC as the hot potato and say they have to do the social media policy. And therefore they don't have to be the bad person, but guess who invented it? They invented it. You see what's going on here? Between the two, they're sort of handing things back and forth. So I don't even know organizationally where it is now, but we being BONC and Dunn and neighborhoods and the city in general. We're all in every problem together, but I do think I agree with Lou, we have a problem with BONC. I wish they would stick to bully pulpit and sometimes to taking the neighborhood council side against Dunn, but I don't think that that's currently the way it is.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Folks, just wait till you see the EVG hybrid report. Okay, Lou and Michael, did you want to, we're coming toward the close of the session. Did you want to offer some words?
Sure. Thank you again for the invitation, Doug. And you were very helpful with our Van Nuys Neighborhood Council as we looked at the code of conduct and trying to get that through our voices made heard on that issue. I really appreciate discussions about this, and my style is a problem solver type style. And what I'm trying to do is put in place some standard ways of doing business for Van Nuys so that in succession, that folks can come in and just keep the ball rolling. And it was shocking to me that those types of protocols, policies, practices weren't in place to keep the council moving forward. And it would be great if we had some partners down at the city to kind of help us do that, because again, with only volunteers and limited paid consultants to assist us, there's a lot of things that should be done and can be done that are not being done. So I appreciate you all for your service to our city.
Okay, thank you, Lou.
Sure. I also wanted to touch on the code of conduct thing, since that's been big. And hope that throughout the city, if your neighborhood council hasn't addressed that yet or looked at that, to look at that and the main resolution that has been passed by a lot of neighborhood councils, including our own. If you need that language, we can send it, of course. But I mean, I think another problem with the another thing just to look out for with Dunn in general and with the code of conduct policy in particular is that any policy that seems to welcome or invite abuse is also really something to watch out for. And I think if it is a sort of situation where real action can be taken against neighborhood council members with either action taken either by a limited number of people or just one person without due process or suspicious evidence, I think the temptation is too high and you're going to get some false accusations and some real problems. And, very long story short, that was the problem that we had a couple of years ago at our neighborhood council in Central San Pedro. And it's been reported on a fair amount in City Watch and elsewhere, but it really boiled down to a very suspicious, politically motivated harassment claim that Dunn immediately treated as if it was, you know, the infallible word from on high, and started taking action against our council before it was even investigated. Now, should it have been investigated? Of course, but there was enough information that Dunn and BONC were made aware of that they should have known. They knew the evidence that it was suspicious and went ahead with it anyways. So that's why I would definitely not want to give Dunn these sort of powers, to institutionalize those sort of powers for Dunn. That would be, it would just welcome too much abuse. So I hope people will look out for that as well, and keep thinking about these things. But this has been a great session so far, and thanks for having me, Tony and Doug and everybody.
You're very welcome. This, by the way, I guess I should thank Tony, first of all, for not asking me to moderate this session. I found out about it when he announced that I was leading the session in a meeting. So but here I am, and I'm glad I've done it. I wish some of the rest of you would have spoken up, and we still have a few more minutes if somebody wants to raise a hand. But I think, like any system, if it weren't for the people, it would be perfect. But here we all are, us imperfect, and flawed human beings. And the fact that we even have a discussion about barriers or obstacles between the 1800 neighborhood council board members, committee members, whatnot, and the bureaucracy that was invented to serve us, in essence, suggests that after 20 years, we got a problem. And we can be angry about it, we can argue about it, but what we really need to do is solve it. And I think all of us need to be willing to reach out to the folks in the department and do it in a respectful way, but do it in a very clear way so that they understand where we're coming from. CC, you have a hand up and you haven't spoken. What would you like to say? Please unmute. CC, there you go.
Hi everyone. I just wanted to say that my comments would be that I kind of echo what Fallon was saying. We really don't know as homeowners or stakeholders what our rights are. So, and when we go to these meetings and we hear some things, we're not really invited to learn about it. Like, this is an incredible meeting and you're doing a great job, Douglas and Tony and Lou and everybody who's talking, because this is the most information we're really getting. So I really appreciate it, but we really don't know what we can and cannot do. Like, I don't even know if I can have my parents come and live with me in my house, because I don't know if where I live in CD12, if I'm allowed to have an ADU attached to my house. I just don't know the laws. And so even though the governor said that you are allowed, it's like, wait a minute, these are my parents. I don't want to have this big apartment or anything that people are saying with the SB9 or SB10. I just want to be able to help my parents. My sister lost her house in the Paradise Fire, so she had to move to Lake Chico. Another sister had to move to Italy because she couldn't afford Burbank anymore. So I don't want that to happen to my parents. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of echoing what Fallon is saying, that we really we need information and transparency and to find out. 'Cause I know a lot of people are against the SB9, but when I heard that, hey, maybe that means that whatever restrictions are on you because of the loans you might have with the city, now maybe we can find out, oh, how can we actually do it? Because we don't want to change, our neighborhood, but we still want to be able to do the same things all of our neighbors are already doing.
Yeah, and
Thank
you. I would just say, if you lived in coastal San Pedro, I would put you in touch with our planning chair and she'd have an answer for you right away. Surprisingly, we do at our neighborhood council a lot of constituent service work. One of the things that we took up, for instance, with regard to ADUs was the fact that a large area, part of our area is within the coastal zone. So we are also under the rule of the Coastal Commission. And there is a coastal commission, I believe it's an additional fee for folks who want to put in ADUs. And our neighborhood council has taken it up with the city and said, you know, if the city council passes a rule, that fee can be waived and we can save folks in coastal who want ADUs a certain amount of money and some additional hassle. But we're one area out of 465 square miles, and trying to get the attention of the LA City Council is tough, but we're working on it.
They
So-
also pass back and forth between different people all the time. So it's like
Yes.
I've been working on asking questions for a year and a half, and all they do is pass you back to the, you know, these people between people. So it's really, I think we need transparency just to know, oh, who could we go to? And I hope that you, Douglas, that's great. I hope you get that for them, because that would be great. Because I think a lot of people just want to help out their families.
Listen, when I was a kid growing up, everybody's grandma lived with them because we had a very different situation in this country. So anybody who wants to take care of their parents, I hope my children are listening. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Tony, why don't you wrap it up for us?
I know we are right up against the time. Let me first of all say that my actual answer to all of our social chaos is we need more multi-generation families. I grew up in one, and I think that's one of the problems right now is we have isolated families without historical understanding of social issues. But I think three things here that Doug has pointed out. This is self-help. This is not us fighting somebody else. We are all in this together, but we have to be active in doing positive recommendations for change that we hope the city will listen to us on. Number two, and it was interesting in marketing, which is why I wasn't here in the first half of this, because our marketing plan discussion turned into diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we were talking about who are we marketing to and what is our message. And it ended up being, actually, when we're talking about some of these solutions, we have to remember every single one of us knew nothing about how the city worked when we first came to a neighborhood council. Our only charter responsibility is to show other people how government works and to get engaged. So we have a responsibility to provide the kind of training that CC and Fallon are talking about. And I think the best way to do it, it's back to committees where you can have real discussion in a room that's not structured like the board meeting where you have to get something done or the monthly expenditure report won't be approved. Committees are where we can all meet each other and do a lot of this inclusion and work together, because it's not our problem as board members, it's our problem members along with Fallon and Cece and everybody else who may not be on a board. We need to do this together to make the communities, neighborhood councils work for the community. So I hope we all keep that in mind as we're going forward. We're not attacking a department. We're attacking some rules or judgments we think may not be helping us and our community members get our work done.
Okay, thank you, Tony. We have 3 minutes left, and we can quit early or.
Well, I thought we had to quit early, actually lose 5 minutes on every session in order to give the room managers the ability to give the following session 10 minutes to sign on early. Correct me if I'm wrong, John.
Yeah, we got like another minute or two, and I just want to remind people in the chat. I just put the links. Thanks everyone for participating in the session. We have a workshop evaluation link, so if you could be so kind as to fill that out. And yeah, we're going to close soon, but there's also the networking lounge link and the link to all upcoming rooms and sessions available as well. So I'll stay open for a couple more minutes just so people can see those links. And then, but yeah, I think we're pretty much done here with the discussion.
There was one, yeah, I'm sorry. There was one really important thing that there's a board member of whom I'm familiar who has for at least a couple of years on every occasion when she has been in a meeting with Raquel Beltran, has said the same thing. How come we can't open up trainings to stakeholders? We should be able to do that. And I don't know if it's a function of the constraints of Cornerstone or what, but I don't see why. I agree. We can't just get those things posted and say, if you want to know about the Brown Act ethics training, Robert's Rules of Order, there's some really good stuff here. Just go here and watch it. The other thing is this, and this came up earlier, I can't remember if it was this session or another session. Once upon a time, if you went to the Dunn website, you would find a page called Best Practices, where neighborhood council board members shared those best practices of things that works well for them in meetings. And I mean, in a sense, everything we've done here today, is trying to talk to each other about best practices. So I would love to see a return of something like that. And we're at 2:20. You want to call it a day, John?
Well, not a day, but we'll call it a session.
Well, call it a session. Okay.